Hello and welcome to our session on the UDL connection to OTES 2.0. I'm Julie Weyandt and I will be facilitating this session with Colleen Kornish. Colleen, say hello to everyone.
Hello.
We are both members of the Ohio UDL Collaborative and we are the UDL trainers for State Support Team 9. We are not OTES trainers, but we have both completed the OTES 2.0 credentialing course, and we're former administrators who have evaluated teachers using the OTES framework. So we are familiar with the process. And we really thought that it would be a great session to get folks excited about UDL and to showcase how using UDL in your classroom can really help boost your teaching into the accomplished rating. So, who are we at SST9? State Support Team 9 provides training and support to schools and districts in Stark, Wayne, and Holmes counties. So, be sure to contact us if you have any questions, especially about UDL. During this session, we will review the OTES 2.0 teacher performance rubric, highlight the UDL guidelines, and then explicitly make the connections between the accomplished ratings in the rubric to UDL. Here are the resources that you're going to need or you're going to find helpful throughout this session. And the first resource is probably the most important resource for this session. It's called the Process and Plan document. So you're going to want to have a copy of this during our session. You may want to pause the recording right now if you need to print out a hard copy, or you can make a digital copy. Colleen and I will walk you through this document throughout the entire session. We're going to ask you to actually highlight either on the document or within your electronic copy. We're going to be looking at the accomplished criteria within the rubric. So, Colleen, if you don't mind, can you go ahead and open up the document so we can walk them through it? All right, so the OTES 2.0 rubric and the UDL guidelines are linked right at the top of this document. We wanted to make sure all of the resources were easily accessible and in one place for you. The OTES 2.0 rubric, sorry, I just said that. This document also includes the 6 domains from the teacher performance rubric from your OTES. And it also will include the domain components and then the accomplished category of the rubric, as well as the UDL guidelines that connect to that particular domain. And then lastly, there's a column for planning. You can also see in this document that we have the portion that takes you from skilled to accomplished in red. So it really kind of delineates what you need to do to be an accomplished teacher. We have the UDL guidelines color coded as well to align to the different brain networks that they are related to. And then finally, as I mentioned in that last column, this is a place for you to plan. How are you going to implement UDL in your classroom and provide evidence to your evaluator? So, we're going to ask you throughout the session to really pause and reflect and also record your responses in this last column. So thank you, Colleen. You can go ahead and navigate us to the second resource, which is the OTES 2.0 Teacher Performance Rubric. And this is actually a link to the full rubric. So the document that we're going to be using today, mostly throughout this session, is only going to focus in on the accomplished rating. But this rubric, if you want to look at the entire rubric, then you would access this particular resource. And then finally, our third resource is a link to access the UDL guidelines. So you can print these off if you'd like, but you can also bookmark this particular website. And this website is found, it's CAST. And what you'll find if you bookmark the website is that these UDL guidelines are interactive. So you just need to click on any one of the guidelines. It'll take you behind the scenes to a different page that will really kind of explain what the guideline means to you, as well as how to apply them in your classroom. So we recommend that you have this website up as an interactive resource to learn more about the guidelines throughout our session. So these are the three resources that you may find beneficial and have ready to access. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks for getting us started. Did you know that OTES 2.0 is a professional growth model and it is intended to be used to continually assist educators in enhancing their teacher performance? This really is about your growth as an educator. So, what are your goals? What do you want to improve? OTES is about your own goal setting and improvement. Remember to have a growth mindset. We can all always improve and enhance our teaching to maximize student outcomes. You may also be new to UDL, or maybe you know about it, but the UDL framework isn't new. UDL stands for Universal Design for Learning, and it is a framework that can be used to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all, and it's based on cognitive neuroscience. The Teacher Performance Evaluation rubric looks at teacher performance through 6 domains of teacher practice: focus for learning, knowledge of students, lesson delivery, classroom environment, assessment of student learning, and professional responsibilities. These organizational areas align with the Ohio standards for the teaching profession. The Teacher Performance Evaluation rubric contains detailed descriptions of practices at 4 performance levels: ineffective, developing, skilled, and accomplished. Implementing the UDL guidelines should land you in the skilled and accomplished rating. UDL is good teaching, and it is about removing barriers and providing access to all students so they can master their standards. A skilled rating means that you're an effective, high-quality teacher. An accomplished rating means that you go above and beyond and that you are facilitating the learning for your students, and primarily that they own their learning. It's not easy to get an accomplished rating in OTES. However, if you implement the UDL framework to fidelity in your classroom, you will improve your chances of earning a skilled and possibly even an accomplished rating.
Thank you, Colleen. The one thing that I absolutely love about the UDL framework is that it gives learners voice and choice in their learning. It is a great way to have your students really own their learning. And as you become familiar with OTES 2.0, the teacher performance rubric, especially the accomplished section, you're going to see that student ownership is really key to becoming that accomplished teacher that we all strive to be. So, what is UDL? Katie Novak is one of the UDL rock stars, and she's an international speaker. She's also an author of several books about UDL. So, let's listen to this 2-minute video of Katie Novak explaining to us what UDL is.
So people ask me all the time, what on earth is UDL? UDL stands for Universal Design for Learning, and it is not differentiated instruction. Whenever I present to teachers or I talk to teachers and I say, oh, UDL is a really great way to give kids choices for how they're going to learn and how they're going to personalize their learning, I hear, oh, I do that already. We used to call it DI. Well, DI exists and UDL exists, and they are actually 2 different things. And so to give you a little analogy, UDL is kind of like when you're having a dinner party when you put out a buffet. So when you're teaching and you want to give students choices for how they're going to learn, you would put out a buffet of options. For example, you would say, after you are solving all of these math problems, you're going to explain or justify how you solve them. And you can do that in a poem, or you can do that in a narrative, or you can create a little skit, or you can do a poster, and you're going to justify your answer. And so what you're doing is you're putting out a buffet of all options. And by nature of having those options, students have to become very creative and self-directed and choose what's best for them. Differentiated instruction, on the other hand, is a similar framework in that it's still providing options for students, but those options are often managed by the teacher. For example, I might say to a certain student, you know, I know you have a hard time writing, and so why don't you draw me a picture about how you solve that? Or I might take a whole group of students who I think need a little bit more challenge, and I take them aside and I say, okay, because you're finished, I want you to work on this. And so those options are kind of like making meals for every single kid in your class. And if I had the option to either put out a buffet and allow my students to choose, or to make 30 meals, I would choose putting out a buffet. And so part of teaching and learning today is about giving students control of their own learning and transferring some of that power back to them, because coming up to a buffet requires that you have to self-assess and you have to think about what is it that you need to eat and what is it can you eat, and then you put it on a plate together. Whereas as teachers, if we're worried all the time about creating these perfect meals for everyone, we're going to be exhausted and we're going to be burnt out in the kitchen.
So as you heard Katie Novak say, the overall goal of UDL is to create expert learners who are purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable.
So people ask me all the time, what on earth?
No problem. I love hearing Katie Novak. Teachers who universally design lessons really honor learner variability and provide choice for their learners. They proactively remove or reduce barriers so that all students can access the learning. And in classrooms that implement UDL, students really do own their learning. So, another important thing to know about UDL is that it's based on cognitive neuroscience, which just simply means the understanding of how our brains learn best. It's based on three different brain networks: the affective network, which is the why of learning, the recognition network, the what of learning, and the strategic network, the how of learning. So, what does all that mean in your classroom? Basically, what it looks like in your classroom, it's how we get our students engaged and motivated in their learning, and it's how they receive information, but also how they show us what they know. So, we are so excited now to take you through a crosswalk of the accomplished section of the OTES 2.0 rubric and the UDL guidelines. We're going to have examples for you, but we're also going to provide you with time to kind of pause, stop, and plan your action steps around how you can practice UDL in your own classrooms. So, Colleen, are you ready to get us started? All right, take us away.
Okie dokie, here we go. So our first domain that we're going to look at is focus for learning. And so what we want you to do is go ahead and get out your copy of the OTES 2.0 and UDL connection document. We're going to go ahead and open ours up and walk you through the connections together. So let me get that powered up here. And Julie, what in this section, when we're looking at this domain, what are the different things in the accomplished rating that really connect to UDL?
Yes. So once again, the domain we're focusing on right now is just focus for learning, and we're going to take a look at the component, the use of high quality student data. So grab your highlighters. I'm going to tell you exactly what to highlight now in this accomplished category. So Colleen, if you wouldn't mind modeling this as well, go ahead and highlight for everybody student growth goals and monitors student progress towards their goals. And then in the red section of this category, highlight student goal setting and progress monitoring. Awesome. So you can see in the next column, we identified 3 UDL guidelines that connect directly to this particular component in the rubric. But really, where UDL connects in this domain or this component is about having students create individual goals and then monitoring their progress toward achieving those goals. And what we know is that students of all ages can create and monitor individual growth goals, even students as young as preschool. So let's go ahead and move into the next component of this domain, and that's connections to prior and future learning. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to ask Colleen to highlight, as you highlight at the same time, the following language within the document that connects to UDL. So please highlight clear and coherent connections with students' prior and future learning. Highlight connections to students among lesson content, other disciplines, and or real world experiences. And then finally, go ahead and highlight understand each student's prior knowledge. So the UDL connection here is really around activating or supplying background knowledge. So in UDL, information is more accessible for learners when it's presented in a way that really primes, activates, or provides prerequisite knowledge for our students. So what that does is it creates Velcro in order for the new learning to stick. Another critical component of UDL that connects to this particular section is really getting to know each one of your students and their unique individual needs. What we call this in UDL is honoring learner variability. So even before you know exactly what students you're going to get in your classroom, before you get your class list, what we do know for sure is that each student who's going to show up in our classrooms, they're going to bring their own unique strengths, their own unique needs as learners, their own unique challenges. And that's why we know variability in students is really the norm and not the exception. So when you universally design your classroom or your lessons, you're going to help and you're going to help to plan for this student learn or variability. Okay, let's go on to the next component, and that's connections to state standards and district priorities. So, Colleen, I would love for you and for all of our listeners to highlight the following words. The teacher's instructional plan incorporates activities, assessments, and resources, including available technology that align with student needs. So, universally designing lessons really requires proactive lesson planning. Proactive is the key there. Removing barriers before the lesson is taught is absolutely key to providing all students access. So let's take a moment now to watch a short video that really highlights one of our UDL connections to this particular domain. And that connection is going to be around or about student goal setting and reflecting.
I approach goal setting just as a weekly thing that we do. The kids are very used to it. On Monday morning, they know that they come in, they get unpacked, and then they're going to set goals for the week. This first quarter, I like to just sort of introduce the whole idea of goal setting to them, just coming up with 3 goals for themselves. What kinds of goals do we usually write on Mondays? Nathan, what do we usually do? Personal goal. Jace, what else? A friendship goal. Jordan, what else? A school goal. Today what we're going to do is you're going to pick one of those goals. And what we're going to do today is we're going to think of some action steps. think it forces them to like really reflect on themselves and think about, okay, what is it that I need to work on this week? And by 5th grade, you know, they have tests to prepare for, they have study guides, and they are very aware and are clear on the objectives that we're covering. So I think it just makes them more self-aware of what they need to get done.
I want you to get with your partner, share with them the goal that you want to work on this week, and talk it out. What are some ways that you can work on your goal, and then swap?
When I have students pair up to share their goals with each other, it just gives them an opportunity to collaborate with a friend and to hear what they're working on. And if their goal isn't specific enough, their friend can maybe catch it and say, well, what about soccer are you going to try to get better at? Or what about social studies are you going to try to focus on?
What kind of goal was that? A school goal?
It was a school goal.
Mine was a personal goal.
A challenge I have about goal setting is that sometimes they're too big and sometimes they're too hard to accomplish. I think about my goal, and whenever it's too hard or too challenging, I think about it and I say, well, that goal was too challenging. Action steps help me with goal setting by giving me some ideas of what to do. It guides me through my goals. I'll go to bed a little bit more early so I can make sure
Okay, so you're gonna get all your bedroom routines like early, that way you can get to bed earlier. Okay. In terms of conferencing with students about their goals, it's not something that I can get to every week, and it's not something I can get to with every single person, but I try my best to just at least have a quick chat with the kiddos about what they're working on, especially when I look at their goals and I see something that maybe concerns me, or maybe I didn't know that they were taking part in. For teachers who haven't done goal setting before, I would definitely say don't be afraid. I feel like a lot of times it seems like it's something that's going to take up a good portion of your day, and it doesn't have to. I have found that if I share with them a Google document with a chart, I can at any time go in and look to see what they're working on, and I can see very clearly which kids didn't set a goal for that week. It helps so much to get to know your kids, and I feel like you're a much better teacher when you know what's going on.
So goal setting is so important in students owning their learning. And when your students set goals and they track their own progress, of course, with your help, you are bound to see better outcomes. And we can't just assume that our students, no matter what age they are, know how to do this. We need to teach them these skills and empower them to be in control of their learning. Now we want you to pause the recording and make a plan for how you could do this in your classroom. So please use the plan section of the document to think about how you will implement the following components of UDL. How will you help individuals set goals and monitor their progress? How will you activate student prior knowledge? How will you proactively plan lessons by removing barriers? So take as long as you need and press play when you are ready to move on. All right, welcome back, everyone. Our second domain is knowledge of students. So I'm going to turn it over to Colleen and have her walk you through the UDL connections in this domain.
Thanks so much, Julie. I love that. It's so important for us to set our own goals with our learning, and it is just as important for our students too as well. So this domain that we're working on is knowledge of students, and it's a short one, but what we want to do is we are going to do the same thing. We'll highlight in the accomplished rating column, we'll highlight what connects to UDL. And so what I'd like for you to highlight now is it's going to start right here at consistent, and it's going to go all the way to the end. So that whole section is connected to UDL. And here are the UDL guidelines that we've selected that go along with this. And Ohio's goal is to educate the whole child, and UDL helps us to do that. UDL considers the individual student's needs by understanding that each learner is unique. We include the student's individual talents in planning and delivering instruction and application. Teachers who apply the UDL framework are culturally responsive teachers. They understand their students' unique backgrounds and help them make connections to their learning. UDL is a team effort. Teachers seek input from all sources to provide cohesive, connective learning experiences for each learner. So now we're going to watch a short video on the importance of knowing your students and being a culturally responsive practitioner.
Umbral de español, busquen su nombre con su palito, muchas gracias.
There are no blank slates walking into the classroom. Culturally responsive teaching is capitalizing on all that students bring with them from their personal lives and their home lives. And it's really knowing that student, knowing where he or she is from, and using that to craft the most meaningful and rigorous learning opportunities. Here at Amigos, the bilingual school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, we are focused on culturally responsive, joyful education.
To borrow Zaretta Hammond's word, culturally responsive practice really is like widening our aperture as adult educators to consider a broader perspective on what strategies can then match with our students' needs if we really want to see more equitable outcomes for our students.
One of the things that we're doing to support that work and our growth as educators are learning walks. Learning walks allow teachers to visit each other's classrooms to see how they are implementing new strategies. We are looking for evidence of equitable student participation, and we're looking to make sure that primarily there's a relationship there, because in order to teach that child, you need to know that child.
We visit the classroom, take notes using our guide.
Tienen un argumento bien fuerte, bien formado. Todos participaron.
We are really looking at what instructional decisions are we making that will support students to have equity of voices, rigor, and consider their different cultures and identities, and really capitalize on that for them to feel safe and authentic and a sense of belonging into our classrooms.
Tessa.
¡Au! Ay, necesitaba evacuar. Hay bombas en todas partes.
I'm really thinking about what are the different ways that one can organize the instruction so there's diversity of access points to this language in the literature, and for the students to be able to feel comfortable sharing what they know, sharing what they don't know.
Como por eso dice hito en hito, como partes de su vida que lo convierten en quien es.
I really thought that one of the strengths was your use of the vocabulary and then giving students the tools they needed to use it themselves.
We come back together for a debrief. We look at questions that may emerge and any recommendations that we've come up with.
Everyone ended up being engaged at some point.
We were struck by the variety and the depth of voice that students were demonstrating in her class. We heard lots of different voices, and that was exciting to see and hear.
We need to make sure that they all feel represented, they all feel safe to do their best learning, they all feel respected. And I think that's a lifelong process for any educator. Culturally responsive teaching isn't something that you say, I went to a professional development session, I'm all set, check the box. It's something you have to dedicate a lot of time to throughout your career to make sure that you're doing the best for the students.
So that video was important to highlight two kind of points about UDL and the connection to the rubric, because remember, we're focusing on being an accomplished teacher. So point number one is knowing our students will help us remove barriers and to educate the whole child, which is what we're charged to do here in Ohio. And if you note in the accomplished column, a lot of that is about how you collaborate with others. And we really liked these learning walks because it shows how you can collaborate with your colleagues to make sure that you really are meeting the needs of all of your students and that you know them so well. Getting that feedback from your colleagues will help boost you into that accomplished rating. So right now, it's time for you to pause the recording and make a plan for how you could do this in your classroom through implementing UDL. So take as much time as you need and press play when you're ready to go. Welcome back. Now let's look at our third domain, lesson delivery.
Hi, everyone. Well, there are a lot of UDL connections in this particular component. The first component we're going to look at is communication with students. And as you can see, we have connected 10 different UDL guidelines in this section alone. So let's go ahead and highlight the connections first, and then we'll talk about it. So if you could highlight with me expectations for mastery, partway down, and then the very end in the red through multiple communication techniques. And we'll keep going using content-specific, developmentally appropriate language and content-specific strategies to engage students be highlighted. Engage students in higher level and creative thinking can be highlighted. The teacher gives student substantive, specific, and timely feedback can be highlighted. And we're still going. You can highlight the red where it starts out. Teacher gives students opportunities to engage in self-assessment all the way to the end. All right, so a lot of UDL connections here. UDL is really about offering multiple ways to engage students, and engaging students is mentioned several times in this particular domain, and particularly this component of the domain. So one way to keep students engaged and sustaining effort is to provide specific and timely feedback. And in UDL, they talk about providing students with what is called mastery-oriented feedback, which really guides learners towards mastery rather than compliance of a particular task. The other connection would be providing time in your classroom for students to engage in self-assessment and reflection. And this definitely has a direct connection to UDL. So let's go ahead and move into the next component, monitoring student understanding. And we're going to highlight starting with consistently. Consistently monitors, addresses, articulates, and anticipates individual student confusion or misconceptions by presenting information in multiple formats. So you can stop at formats. And I really think the key word here, which makes it an accomplished rating as well because it's in red, is the word anticipates. Anticipates individual student confusion. And in UDL, you plan for that learner variability, like we already talked about. You know that all of your students have these unique needs. So you spend time identifying all the possible learner barriers before the lesson is taught. And that's where anticipating individual confusion has a direct connection to UDL. So moving on to the next component, student-centered learning. We have quite a bit to highlight here. Start with learning is primarily self-directed. And then continue with facilitator, encouraging students to apply their knowledge and skills as developmentally appropriate. And then in the red, you can highlight persist in the learning tasks. And you can also highlight independent. And if you move down to the last portion here, highlight students to actively take part in developing goals towards mastery, and students are responsible for deciding how to demonstrate their learning. as well as lesson accessibility and challenging for all students. And then one last section here, various learning needs of individual students. So a lot of UDL connections in this component. Student-centered learning has UDL written all over it. Learning that is self-directed. The teacher is basically playing the role of a facilitator in this area. Students are developing their own goals. They're working towards mastery and progress monitoring those goals. And students are taking responsibility for deciding how to demonstrate their learning. So, this truly is the ultimate goal of UDL, and that is creating expert learners, students who are in control of their own learning. So, we're going to go ahead and pause here. We're going to watch a short video on how to create expert learners in your classrooms.
Expert learner. Achieving expertise is the end goal in any field of endeavor, from playing the viola to building wooden boats to solving algebra problems. Learning itself is no different. Just as violists, boat builders, and algebra students have to work hard to achieve excellence, anyone engaged in learning must strive to become expert learners. Expert learners, each in their own way, are motivated and purposeful, knowledgeable and resourceful, strategic and goal-directed. They know how to tackle learning and take responsibility for the results. Let's take a look at expert learning through the UDL lens. Expert learners are engaged in learning and know why it's important to learn the material at hand. They relish the challenge of learning and persist when encountering the inevitable obstacles. Expert learners know a great deal about how they learn best. They know how to ask the right questions, where to look for answers, and when to ask for help. Expert learners are unafraid to take the wheel and drive their own learning. They know how to set their own goals and make plans for achieving them. They can monitor their progress and make the necessary adjustments to stay on track. For them, the process of learning is more important than mastering individual skills. It's important to remember that variability extends to the notion of the expert learner. We shouldn't confuse expert learner with exemplary student. Rather, an expert learner is any learner who knows how best to manage their strengths and challenges in order to achieve their educational goals. Armed with knowledge about what makes an expert learner, educators can begin to redefine their instructional purpose. With the shift in focus from teaching students information to teaching students how to learn, educators can design engaging and goal-directed learning opportunities. Universal Design for Learning provides educators with a framework for creating learning environments that encourage curiosity, passion, self-reflection, persistence, mastery, and growth. In short, UDL is key to helping all students become the best learner they can be.
So, the goal of this domain, lesson delivery, really is all about creating expert learners.
Expert.
So, at this time, we're going to have you pause and plan again and think about the following UDL components that really make up the lesson delivery domain. How are you engaging your students? How do you provide mastery oriented feedback? How do you provide opportunities for your students to self assess and reflect? And how do you anticipate individual student confusion by planning for learner variability? This is a big area, so you may need to take a little bit longer to plan for this component, but we'll be right here whenever you get back. All right, we are halfway done. We're heading into domain 4, which is around classroom environment. So let's do our UDL connections. Colleen, are you ready?
I'm ready. So classroom environment is where we're at now on the document. And so what we'd like for you to highlight here is the word collaboratively. We'd also like for you to highlight students initiate responsibility. UDL classrooms are the places where students take ownership of their learning and the classroom. They are empowered to co-create spaces that meet their needs. If they need to stand during the lesson, they stand. If they have an idea for how something could work better, it's tried. The teacher respects their students as human beings and gives them a say in operations. Because UDL empowers students, they will initiate responsibility for making the classroom run effectively, not just for themselves, but for all. And the component, the UDL guideline that we have highlighted here is foster collaboration and community. The next component in classroom environment is classroom climate and cultural competency. So if you can get your highlighter ready, I will let you know where you need to highlight. The first word we need to highlight here is intentionally. UDL teachers, they are very intentional and purposeful about what they do. We also need to highlight here where it says evidence of rapport and expectations for respectful, supportive, and caring interactions with and among students and the teacher. We're going to highlight that whole little chunk there. Up next, we have this next little section, and we'd like for you to highlight regard for student perspectives, experience, and culture. That would be highlighted. And then we're going to highlight create a positive climate of openness, respect, and care. The teacher anticipates and effectively addresses needs related to, and then keep going. And we're going to highlight, whoa, that's a little too far. Sorry about that. So we will highlight again, sorry, we'll come back up here and just highlight this chunk on this page. If you're doing it digitally with me, you know how challenging this can be. So on the next, after the page break, we're going to highlight students' sense of well-being. The teacher seeks and is receptive to the thoughts and opinions of individual students and the class. We'll highlight that. And then we'll come down here to all students are recognized and valued. And we have, again, we're fostering collaboration and community. And we also have a couple other guidelines that we have connected to this component. UDL practitioners intentionally create spaces that honor each student. Students are people, and therefore in a UDL classroom, they're respected as such. Because of this, the relationships are respectful, supportive, and kind, not just between the teacher and the students, but from student to student as well. Again, if you practice UDL, you are intentionally paying attention to the experiences and cultures of each of your students. These are always factors that are considered in the planning phase of lesson design. You think about barriers before the lesson and provide options that make learning accessible for every single learner in your classroom. So at this time, let's take a look at a video about removing barriers in your classroom. As you watch, think about any barriers that you may have in your classroom.
Created using Powtoon.
I just love that video because UDL is really about proactive planning to remove barriers so all of your students can be successful. The classroom environment domain is really about providing your students a safe and supportive environment where they have access to the things that they need to be successful in school. It's about anticipating what your students need and collaborating with them to make sure that their needs are met. At this time, we want you to plan for this domain. So pause, plan, and we'll see you back here when you're done. How can you prepare your classroom environment to meet the needs of all of your students? The fifth domain is assessment of student learning. So Julie, are you ready to walk us through this one?
Yes, I am. So we're going to start. There's only one component. Nope, I'm lying. There are two components. We're actually going to combine these two. So I'm going to have you highlight everything in both of these components right now. And I'd like you to start by highlighting the words intentionally and strategically. And then highlight multiple assessments. Then you can go down into the red and highlight assessment choices. Also in the red, data trends. And then right below that, anticipate learning obstacles. And then one last chunk is the very last three lines. Collaboratively plan instruction to meet individual student needs. And then I mentioned, let's go ahead and highlight while we have it out in the second component here, starting with above all the way to the end. Above expected growth and or achievement for most students. All right, and you can see we have placed a lot of different UDL guidelines as connections or supports or ways for you to really implement these particular components within assessment of student learning. But this domain has a direct connection to the third UDL principle, and that's providing multiple means of action and expression. Students do not learn the same, so their knowledge really should not be assessed in the same way. So in order to really hit accomplished in this particular domain, you do need to offer your students assessment choices. Let them really choose the best way to show you what they know. And this does require students to truly know and understand how they learn best, which essentially cultivates the expert learners, which is, once again, the ultimate goal of UDL. So let's take a look at a short video that really explains how and why we need to provide multiple options for our students to really show us what they know.
The Universal Design for Learning principle for multiple means of action and expression is all about how learners demonstrate what they learn. In this short video, we will cover options for means of expression, technology and media tools for student construction, composition, and communication, and student support and assistive technologies. Students do not learn the same, so their knowledge should not be assessed in the same way either. Instead of having students take a test or write an essay, give them options. Assess their learning by having them complete case studies, role play exercises, experiments, group projects, oral presentations, or model building. Really, anything beyond the status quo. Before you start offering these alternatives, there are some things you can provide to ensure student success in completing their assessments. This may include word processing software, recording devices and software, graph paper, sketch pads, and calculators, sentence starters or strips, story maps outlining concept, storyboarding, and mind mapping tools, virtual and physical manipulatives, and numerous web applications for images, videos, wikis, online discussions, and presentation design. As technology advances, students must learn how to choose and adapt the best medium of expression. Look beyond the text. Media and student communication tools include speech, comics, graphics, infographics, video, music, dance and movement, visual arts, and three-dimensional art. You can also promote the use of social media and interactive web applications like online discussion forums, chats, web design, annotation tools, and animated presentations. Aim to encourage students to strengthen their ability to solve their problems and complete tasks using a variety of strategies. So what if you have students who are physically unable to navigate some of these tools? Well, students with disabilities will need additional support. The goal is that we still want to challenge them and encourage them to learn how to use these tools. All students can be supported if there are alternatives for the timing and range of actions needed for students' interaction with learning materials and technologies, and alternatives for students' physical interaction with learning materials, whether by touch, speech, a button, a controller, keyboard, or adapted keyboard. Examples of assistive technologies used in classrooms include text-to-speech tools, listening systems, low-tech handouts, sip and puff systems, proofreading software, and assistive math tools. With the principle for multiple means of action and expression, you can transform the student learning experience into one that is both dynamic and meaningful. You can start by incorporating more options for student action and expression into your lesson planning. There are a variety of technology and media tools to make this all possible. You and your students have all the support you need. Thank you so much for watching. For more information, visit udlguidelines.cas.org.
All right, we'll go ahead to the next slide, Colleen, because this next slide really is a visual that summarizes this video. This visual really demonstrates that there are many ways to get to the top of the mountain, but the view is always the same once you are there. So how can you look at your classrooms in this way? And how can you ensure that all of your students are able to reach their goals? And does it really matter if they get how they get there as long as they get to the top? So, how can you give students options to show what they know? This is your time to pause and plan, jot down some of your ideas. And when you get back, we have one domain left. All right, this is the final OTES 2.0 domain, and that is called professional responsibilities. So, Colleen, are you ready to take us home?
You know it, baby. Let's do it. So let's open up our document if you're doing it virtually, or grab your hard copy, and let's go into that last domain of professional responsibilities. In this one, we want you to highlight, starting with multiple. You've heard that several times in our presentation today. UDL is about multiple means of lots of things. So are we providing those different options? We also want to highlight communication and engagement strategies. We want to highlight two-way communication. It's not just about us sharing, but that we listen to the other people that are included in educating. So we want to listen to our parents, our colleagues, and most importantly, our students. This domain is all about collaboration, and folks who use UDL are always looking to collaborate with others to provide the best learning experiences for all of their students. They collaborate with their students, families, and colleagues, and true collaboration is two-way. And we have listed here the different guidelines that we think align with this component. Up next, we're going to look at the component of communication and collaboration with colleagues. So on this one, we want to highlight collaboration, and we want to highlight outside of the classroom. Teachers who use UDL work with others outside of the classroom to plan and learn together. Remember, we've talked about UDLs about proactive planning, and that means that you can't always do it yourself. We want you in UDL to collaborate with others and get their feedback and insight as well as you plan. And we, once again, say that this fosters collaboration and community in the guidelines. And the final component we have here is district policies and professional responsibilities. So in this one, you're going to highlight at the very end, the teacher helps shape school policy at the school, district, or state level. Again, this fosters collaboration and community. And this component is about being a leader with not just in your classroom, but in your school and in your community. Do you lead others to do inclusion, to co-plan, to co-serve? Do you train others on what you're learning about UDL? Learning and growing with our colleagues is so important, and accomplished teachers do it regularly. They believe in collective teacher efficacy, and they lead the work. So let's check out a video on collective teacher efficacy. While you're watching, think about ways that you promote shared learning and collaboration in your role.
Collective teacher efficacy refers to a group of teachers' beliefs. It could be a team of teachers on staff at a school or an entire staff, but it refers to a belief in their ability to influence student outcomes, including those who are unmotivated, disengaged, or disadvantaged. So teachers' beliefs are very powerful because they guide our actions, they guide our behavior, the effort that we put forth, how much we persist, especially when faced with difficult challenges. So it's really important to openly share, discuss, and collectively develop beliefs about our ability to impact student outcomes. If educators' realities are filtered through the belief that there's very little they can do to influence student outcomes, then those beliefs will be manifested in their practice. But I think one of the most important aspects of our beliefs is the idea that we hold expectations for students. And what we find in the research is when teachers hold high expectations, they have a greater sense of collective teacher efficacy. And so the relationship between those two ideas is really important. But most importantly, when teachers hold high expectations, they also help students to believe that they can do well. And so they raise students' expectations of themselves. So where collective efficacy is present, staffs are more likely to put forth greater effort and persistence. They're more likely to attend to students who are struggling and need extra support. They're more likely also to increase time on task and encourage parental involvement because they have the belief that they're able to achieve the outcomes they want, so they welcome parents into the school environment. In addition, when collective efficacy is present, staffs are more likely to foster learner autonomy. They're more likely to believe that they can decrease disruptive behavior, and therefore they do so. They have higher expectations of students.
I just love that video because it is about our belief in ourselves and our teams and what we can accomplish together when we work together, and how that impacts our students and family and school community. So let's take a moment and put how you can plan how to be a leader in your school. How can you help boost the collective teacher efficacy in your school, in your district, in your region, and even the state of Ohio? Take a moment to put a plan of action together. So we have shown you the UDL connections to OTES, and there are many. So we're just going to flip through them because we think this is really powerful. So we have a ton of connections. And remember that you need to really look at what UDL can offer yourselves professionally when you're being evaluated, but more importantly, what that can do for your students. And there are a ton of connections. It just keeps going. So we have shared all of these with you already, but we thought that that was a powerful slide to show those connections again. So to review, UDL is a great way to foster student ownership of their learning. It's a fantastic framework for ensuring that you're meeting the individual needs of your students, and UDL has many connections to high quality, accomplished teaching. Now, we wanted to give you a little bit of a disclaimer. While we see the major connections to UDL and the accomplished OTES rating, we have to give you this disclaimer. Julie and I can't guarantee that you will get accomplished in all areas just by doing UDL. UDL will certainly give you a better chance, but we can't say that you will certainly get accomplished. Perhaps your evaluator doesn't know much about the UDL principles and framework, and you could always have a conversation with them about this during your post-conference. However, we can say with much certainty that when you engage your students in their learning and give them ownership, your classroom will be a space where an accomplished rating can be more easily obtained. Also, you can't fake UDL. This is a framework that empowers students, and you can't fake that. Your evaluator will know if your students truly own their learning or not. So you can't say, oh, my student's goal set, if the evaluator sees that the kids have no idea what those goals are when they're in observing you. Regardless of this, please consider learning more about UDL and trying it in your classroom. It is a powerful way to honor all of your students, to educate the whole child, to give access to everyone in your room, and to create expert learners. So maybe you're thinking, oh boy, I really should look into this UDL because I want to get the highest rating I can in OTES 2.0. Well, Julie and I, we have additional learning opportunities for you. So if you want to learn more about Universal Design for Learning, let us know. You can check out our UDL 101 on-demand module, or talk to your administrator about maybe getting a team together to do SST9's UDL team training. You can also Google a lot about UDL. You can check out CAST's website and look into independent learning opportunities through them, or the queen of UDL, Katie Novak, who we saw at the beginning. We also, the UDL Collaborative is a part of something that happens pretty regularly, and it's called hashtag UDL chat, and that's on Twitter. So if you have a Twitter account and you want to learn more about UDL, just put that hashtag in, and you'll be able to learn more about UDL and collaborate with others across our state, our country, and the world. At this time, we would like for you to take a moment to give us some feedback. It's super important to us that we know if this was impactful to you or not, and or what you might want to know more about in the future. So please take a few moments to fill this out for us. You can click on the link in the slide deck or scan the QR code. And thank you so much. We wish you the best of luck implementing UDL, and we hope that you will see growth in your OTES evaluations as a result. Please let us know if you have any questions. Thanks.